Bryan, we've talked enough. You've heard enough girls speak now, so we're going to hand you the microphone.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you all so much, and welcome to everyone all across the country. This is officially my first webinar, so hopefully it can be as impactful as in person. It's truly an honor to speak with you guys today. Educators have had a huge influence on me in my life, and in the Missouri, a lot of our health sciences is done through our vocational programs, and I have a huge heart and emphasis in vocational education. So it's always a pleasure to speak with folks who are in that realm of education. So start off, I will tell you a little bit about myself, but I want to give you a background on how we got here. So the Missouri Institute of Positive Coaching is a program that's developed out of the University of Missouri by Dr. Rick McGuire. He was a longtime track coach at the University of Missouri and the head of their sports psych department. And so today I just kind of want to walk you guys through my journey into taking his philosophy and working with a team of people, a team of educators, to apply it to our school. And I've done this in 3 schools, and we learn stuff every day. It's not a cookie cutter approach. It is more philosophical in nature, and then you take the parts you like and make it adjust or adapt to your classroom or your building or your team or your district. So about myself, get my thing to work here. There we go. So I grew up in Eastern Iowa. I did see one person from Iowa on there, so that's good. So there's actually 2 of us maybe from Iowa on here as well. Eastern Iowa, a small town called DeWitt, Iowa. My mom owned a tax shop and was a school bus driver. My father was a machinist, and he worked for Caterpillar Tractor Company in Mount Joy, Iowa. Lived out in the country, small town, and had a very fortunate childhood, a stable family, good community. I have one older brother he played basketball at the University of Tulsa. So to give you guys a little bit of context, just a country boy from Iowa who went to the big city and hopefully learned a few things that I can share. So Waterloo, I see that very good. So I spent a lot of time in Cedar Falls. I have an aunt and uncle that live in Cedar Falls, so very familiar with Waterloo. Went to school first at Ellsworth Junior College, which is in Iowa Falls, Iowa. I went there after Ellsworth. I went to the University of South Carolina and played football for 3 years. To give everybody a little background on the call, the folks from South Carolina, there's 2 distinct schools in South Carolina. There's a good school, the University of South Carolina. There's the other school. It's called Clemson University. It's orange. So orange is my least favorite color. That's for you, Nancy. Sorry. After I graduated from the University of South Carolina, I moved back to Missouri. And I went to the University of Missouri and got a master's in Parks and Recreation Administration. My bachelor's degree is criminal justice from the University of South Carolina. Then I ended up going to Central Missouri and getting a master's in education. So as you can tell, I really didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. I had lots of different degrees, and I've got probably more college hours than anybody on the call. But ended up getting my doctorate through St. Louis University in educational leadership. Some places that I've worked, right out of college, I worked for the Sprint Corporation in Kansas City, Missouri, in their HR department. And after that, I decided to go to work for the Missouri Department of Youth Services, and that's where I got into teaching. My first teaching job in the public sector was in Nevada, Missouri. Then I went to North Callaway. There were the Thunderbirds, Oak Grove, and Moberly Spartans are some of the school districts that I worked in. I started off as a special education teacher. Well, I should take a step back. I started off as a vocational teacher for the Division of Youth Services and developed a welding program to give our kids a trade that would hopefully give them some success when they got out of our facility. Then moved into the public sector and special ed. I've been a high school assistant principal. I was a high school principal, both in Nevada, Missouri. I've been the superintendent of North Callaway, the Thunderbirds, and Oak Grove. And currently my role is in mid-Missouri. I'm the assistant superintendent in charge of student services and human resources in Moberly, Missouri. So this is a couple pictures of the vocational program that I started in the Division of Youth Services. We received a grant, and you can see there we got over $100,000. We constructed a building and really made a positive impact, I think, on some of our students, just giving them some skills when they got out to be successful. So like I said at the very beginning, I have a soft spot in my heart for vocational education and see some real value in it. As you know, my dad was a machinist, so he was always asking me what I learned today, and I wasn't really pro books. My grandfather was a construction worker, and he said he went to the school of hard knocks. So that's kind of my background and how I got into education. So when I was a superintendent in North Callaway, we had a group of our board members go to a workshop at our state conference, and Dr. McGuire was there giving a presentation. They came back from that conference and they asked if I had heard about the Missouri Institute of Positive Coaching or Coach McGuire. At the time, I hadn't heard about the Institute specifically, but I had heard about Coach McGuire being from mid-Missouri and living here. He's very well known in the world of sports psychology and track coaching. So they asked me to go meet with Coach, see if it'd be something we wanted to bring into our district. So I went over and talked to Coach McGuire, and I was there for about 2 minutes. And I knew that what he had was exactly what we needed in our district. It's an overall program that's very philosophical, not cookie cutter approach. It's designed to have a transformational impact on your school or your team, wherever you're applying it. So you take the good parts and make it your own. And so today I will kind of walk you through some of the things we came up with. So as I started talking to our board at North Callaway and said, yes, it's definitely something that we wanted to try or implement in our district, we started talking about coaches and teachers. And besides my family, coaches and teachers have had more of an impact on me or who I am today than anybody in my life. And it was very evident to see our board was that way as well. So, you know, think about yourself personally. What coaches and impacts had a positive impact on you, or what type of an impact did those folks have on you throughout your life? For me personally, this is a group of coaches who were very significant in my life. Coach Dwight Spangler, my high school football coach, and he taught me more about being a young man than he ever did about football. Coach Kreider was another one of my high school coaches. Coach Kreider is probably the solidest, highest character person I've ever met, and had a huge influence on me. Then I went to junior college at Ellsworth, and Lloyd Cisco was my coach. They were very successful, but Coach Cisco taught me the importance of hard work. Eddie Williamson was the offensive coordinator at South Carolina when I was there, and he taught me a lot about being positive and having faith in yourself. The story I tell about Coach Williamson is one day I was on the bus and I transferred from junior college to a Division I college at South Carolina. I was an All-American in junior college and thought I was pretty good. And I got to South Carolina, and it was the hardest transition I'd ever been through. In high school, I was always the biggest, the fastest, most successful. But when you get to South Carolina, everybody in the locker room was just as good as I was. And so I really struggled with not being the best on the team and making mistakes and not being successful. I was there for about 4 days that spring, and we'd been through 4 days of spring practice. And I was just about done and was having doubting myself whether I'd made the right decision. I couldn't block anybody in practice. They were all bigger and stronger and faster. One day, our defensive end was a gentleman by the name of David Turnipseed, and I blocked him one time in practice. And we were on the bus ride back to our stadium. We used to bus from our stadium to our practice field back then. And Coach Williamson walked down the aisle of the bus and he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Hey, good job out there today blocking Turnipseed." That one compliment saved my career at South Carolina. So I talk a lot about how do we talk to kids, not using sarcasm too much or being sarcastic, because you never know when a positive word you say, one compliment may change a kid's life. And Coach Williamson did that single-handed. He has no idea to this day probably that he did that, but that pat on the shoulder gave me enough confidence to improve and do better at South Carolina. Richard Bisaccia was the coach at South Carolina who recruited me. Coach Bisaccia has been very successful. He was interim coach for the Los Angeles Raiders. He's currently the special teams coordinator for the Packers. Coach Bisaccia taught me a lot about caring about the people that you deal with. I didn't always make the best choices at South Carolina, got in some trouble sometimes, but Coach Bisaccia cared about me. And he was always there for me when I needed. So those five guys really had a huge impact on me in my life. Now, the two little guys off to the side there, high school wrestling coach and assistant football coach, not such a positive impact. Had a high school wrestling coach that said and did things to us that was so disrespectful and not right. Had a high school assistant football coach. To give you some perspective, when I was a kid, football was my life. It's all I read about. It's all I thought about. It's all I talked about. My dream was to play college football. And so when I was a sophomore in high school, we hired a new coach, and he was coming from a college where he played, and he was the first college player that we had on our coaching staff. And I remember being so excited that I was going to be able to learn from this guy, and he's going to help me achieve my goals. And after practice one day, he was in the gymnasium, and I went up and I talked to him, and I said, "Coach, my dream is to play college football. What do I need to do, and how can I get better?" And he said something to me that day that I'll never forget. I can remember where I was standing when he said it. I can remember what I was wearing. I can remember what the gym smells like. He said, "You're not good enough to play college football." It's still emotional today. It crushed me. For me, that was my dreams and aspirations, and that's all I cared about. My brother played college basketball, and so I share that sometimes, and I've had people say, "Yeah, but that's a struggle, and it made you who you are today." And I agree with that. The one thing I often tell teachers and coaches, though, is I had two parents at home, a loving family and brother. Think about some of the kids we teach today that don't have that, and what impact would that have on those kids if they didn't have that support system? So again, I always talk about the power of a compliment, and be careful how we say things to kids, and if we truly care about them, how it can be positive influence on their life. So as a district, we started looking at that, and we're like, well, how do we get our coaches better? And there's coaches clinics, there's coaching books, there's resources, videos, all this stuff about how do we become a better coach, what I call the X's and O's, but there's not much out there for coaching the kid. And we felt that's where this philosophy really fit and could really help us develop our coaches. Not long after that discussion in that same meeting, we had the conversation that, coaching is teaching and teaching is coaching. Our teachers are coaches in the classroom. You guys are all coaches in your classrooms. We're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to motivate kids. We're trying to help them reach their potential. So we started to reflect on some of the teachers that we had in our life. And these are two that had a positive influence on me. Mrs. Julie Doom was my fourth grade teacher. Mrs. Doom had more confidence in me than I had in myself back then. And she told me every single day, "Bryan, you can do it." And she said it enough that it eventually stuck. Mr. Hansen was a junior high science teacher. He had such a positive impact on more kids in DeWitt, Iowa, especially young men, than I think he would ever imagine. And I had a third grade teacher that had a not so positive impact on me. Was mean. And if I could talk to her today, I'd probably ask her, "Do you even like kids?" Because she was really tough on kids and had a negative impact on me personally. So as a board, we started looking at how do we get our teachers better at what they do. And again, there's stuff out there on PD, on curriculum, instructional strategies. People can get experience. There's online resources. But how do we develop the student? So we decided to take that approach on the athletic fields, and how do we merge it into our classrooms? And so that's how we got to where we were. And one of my favorite quotes: "It's easier to build strong men than to repair. It's easier to build strong children. Than repair broken men." So that's kind of how we got started on this journey. Something must be wrong with my computer. I get these pictures just pop up in there. It's a glitch. It's a glitch sometime, Nancy, in my computer. So hopefully that won't happen too often during the presentation. So after we decided that in the fall of that year, we asked Coach McGuire to come and meet with us. And he did a workshop for our entire staff. And it was our teachers, our coaches, but more than that, we wanted our custodians. We wanted our bus drivers. We wanted our cooks. We wanted every single person that worked in our school district that touched kids to hear this philosophy. So Coach McGuire came in, and I remember the first question of the workshop that he asked us. And I want you guys all to reflect on this. Ask yourself, what do you value? And so he gave us some time to think about that, and I thought, that sometimes we don't keep that in perspective, but, faith, family, and education, and those are some things that we really value. But when I was doing that, I'd actually gone up and sat with our staff, and I remember looking around the gymnasium thinking, man, I've got a huge burden here. I'm responsible for every single one of these people. I'm responsible for their families. I'm responsible for their income, for making them be better. So for me, it really sat me back on my chair, and I decided that day that I was going to be the best I could possibly be for every single person in the room, because what's really important and why we do what we do. So I tell people, you can't change your past, truly look in the mirror and start what you're doing right now. So I made a commitment that day to be the best superintendent I could be, by whatever means that was necessary. So the program of positive coaching is not based on Coach McGuire's ideas or thoughts necessarily completely. It's based on some of his experience, but it's based in science. So I'll refer to this slide quite often. There's 8 fundamental sciences that we base our approach on. And you guys are going to all recognize a lot of those. Maslow and the hierarchy of needs. Any education person, of course, has learned about that. But then we took these other concepts, Bandura and Deci and Ryan and self-determination theory, Seligman and PERMA. The one that really resonated with me was Carol Dweck. And if you've not read the book Mindset by Carol Dweck, I strongly encourage everybody to do so. In my opinion, it is the most powerful parenting, teaching, coaching book that I've ever read. In my districts where I work now, I tell people, if you promise me you'll read it, I'll buy anybody a copy of the Growth Mindset who will just send me an email. I'll send you a copy of it for free because it's that powerful. So we started diving into these 8 sciences and trying to become experts in it. We actually divided up into teams and people started to learn about these things and then report back to the group. And there's lots of books, literature. Here's some of the ones that are specific to each one of those areas. And we brought that back together and started to put it together. So today I want to go through just some of those concepts and how we apply them in the classroom. And of course, I got to start with growth mindset because that's Carol Dweck. And I think it's really an amazing concept. But essentially, the growth mindset is that everyone can be great. If you work hard and you understand that, hard work is one of the most important things that we can do to be successful, whether that's on the athletic field, whether that's learning to be a superintendent, a teacher, whatever we're teaching kids, hard work is one of the most important things that we talk about. But more importantly, and a foundation is based on belief. And we've done a lot of study and a lot of research on self-efficacy. And I would encourage you guys to do so as well. That's one thing that I've read a lot about, and the power of believing in ourselves and making sure that our students believe in themselves. Hard work, preparation, and like I talked about, the one example I give there is when I was the superintendent in North Callaway, we had a 3rd grade teacher who had been a 3rd grade teacher for 30 years. She taught in the same classroom, in the same school, in a small little town of Williamsburg, Missouri. And her test scores were always off the charts. She had several different superintendents. She had several different principals. And every year she had a new group of kids come through. She dealt with several different kinds of curriculums. I mean, she'd been there so long, she saw them leave and come back, the whole cycle of education. So when she was going to retire, I went and talked to Miss Metz, and I asked her, I said, what's the key? How can you be so successful? And she said preparation was by far the most important thing. And she prepared every single night for every one of her kids and met them where they were. So think about the concept of, the amount of preparation that she put into it was really significant. During a growth mindset, you compliment effort and not talent. We don't tell kids how talented they are. We tell them, hey, great job working, and look what happened. And we're trying to make the connection between hard work and success. And mistakes are part of the process. When I was a young man, even in athletics or in the athletic field, I was devastated and hated making mistakes because I felt that as a failure. But now we're trying to change the concept that mistakes are part of the process, and that's how we grow. And I think we're seeing more and more of that. The one part that I see from a high central office level administration is that maybe sometimes our school boards don't have a growth mindset. Maybe our teachers and our principals do, and our staff do. But then we get in trouble when the board or people above us don't. And it can kind of be a conflict of interest some there. But it's something we're working on, making sure that we understand that mistakes are part of the process. And lastly was to never quit. There's a book, Grit, by Angela Duckworth, and she talks about the importance of following your passion and being persistent and persevering. So again, never quit. So those are some things that, again, very surface level type stuff on growth mindset. The vision that I try to paint for our staff is just imagine if every student who came through our doors, every teacher they dealt with, never told them they couldn't do something they didn't want to do. And every kid believed they could they could do whatever they wanted to do. How powerful that would be if it was kindergarten through 12th grade and we all had a growth mindset. Because sometimes in education, I think we put kids in silos and we label them. So we really try to get away from that and just show the kids we have confidence and belief in them and the impact that has in a positive way. One of my favorite quotes that I actually came up with is that anyone can be great at anything if they believe, work hard, and never quit. And again, that's based on the growth mindset. After reading the book Mindset and working with kids for 20 plus years, I truly believe this. I even go out on a stretch sometimes, and I say things like, I believe anybody can play in the NBA if they want to. And I've had folks come up to me and say, how's that possible? What if they're not very tall or they're, not very athletic? I said, I didn't say it's going to be possible. I said, if they believe, work hard, and never quit, if they truly believe in themselves. And when I say work hard, I think sometimes kids misunderstand what I mean there. The Tiger Woods example I give is that he hit golf balls every day since he was 3 years old. And it's no wonder that he's so good. If I wanted to be a professional golfer, I could probably do, I know I could do it, but I'd have to hit golf balls for 23 hours a day, maybe for 10 years. I'm not willing to make that sacrifice. But again, giving the kids and not limiting them based on our preconceived notions or labels that we've put on them, things of that nature. Self-efficacy, it is something that you can grow in kids. You can help them to believe in themselves. And here's a way you do it. There's 4 aspects to it. And so one thing we've tried to do is really help teach our kids to believe in themselves. The example I give is let's say if a kid wants to be a basketball player, and he's struggling and he's having trouble shooting free throws, for example. Some things as you can talk to him on is verbal persuasion is one where if someone credible comes up to him and says, hey, you can do this, just keep working. The important part of verbal persuasion is the part about it's a credible witness or a credible person. So lots of times when mom and dad say it, it's not quite as persuasive. But if a high school basketball player said it to an elementary student, that's going to be very credible. If a college athlete said it to a high school student, that's going to be very credible. If a pro athlete said it, again, that verbal persuasion of someone else showing confidence in them. Performance outcomes, that's by showing them, that when you were little and you didn't know how to tie your shoes, but you worked hard at it and you made mistakes, but you kept practicing. You have been able to go through that process and overcome that struggle. So you make a connection between other things they've done and success and how they can do that for this as well. Vicarious experiences is if they see folks or kids in their similar situation having success and the way they found that success, then that gives them that belief in themselves. And then lastly is psychological feedback and we talk a little bit of things like, you're going to get frustrated and that's okay. That's part of the process. So we're trying to be better at getting kids to believe in themselves. And these are some things that we're doing. I talked a little bit earlier about Coach Williamson and the power of a compliment. These are just some of my favorite quotes with that. I talked a little bit in the introduction about sarcasm. It's one thing that we're really focusing on in our high schools. When I walk through the hallways in our high schools, I see our coaches giving kids a hard time, kind of razz them a little bit. And so oftentimes I'll walk up to the coach and I'll say, is the kid mature enough to handle that? And they're like, oh yeah, he can handle it, So the story I always tell is I have 3 children and my oldest son is a great basketball player. And when he was in junior high, he was the best basketball player on the team. And since he was in 7th grade, he's made 1,000 baskets every single day until he graduated high school. At the end of the year at their junior high banquet, our coach was calling them up on the stage for their awards. But before we went to the banquet, my son came out of his bedroom and he had a pair of sweatpants on. And his name is Tully. And I said, Tully, you can't wear sweatpants to the athletic banquet. You got to at least put on a pair of khakis or dress pants. And he said, well, I don't have any that fit or that are clean. And I said, I know you've got a pair. So he came out of his room and his khakis were about 3 inches too short. It looked like they'd been in his backpack for about 4 weeks. They were wrinkled. And I said, well, the sweatpants probably look better. So he wore the sweatpants to the banquet. And at the end of the banquet, they had the MVP award and Tully won it. And the coach, as he was calling him down to the stage, he said something to him like, Tully, I appreciate you dressing up for the banquet. Now, our coach loved Tully. Tully appeared to be a very confident young man. No one in the room thought that was ever inappropriate or, out of line. So the banquet was over and we were cleaning up the auditorium and I couldn't find my son. I was like, I wonder where he's at. I couldn't find him. So we cleaned up and we left and I went out to my truck and he was sitting in the back seat. He was crying in the back seat. And I was like, man, what's the matter? And he said he was embarrassed when coach commented about his sweatpants. And so I always tell that story because you may think that the kids are really confident and can handle that razzing, but oftentimes they're not. So I always say, instead of using sarcasm to show affection to kids, why not just give them a sincere compliment? So ethic of care is the next broad area that we talk about. Nell Noddings wrote a book on ethic of care, and we try to establish a high level of care for all of our staff and our students. Essentially, we want people to know that we care about them. And I ask teachers all the time, how do your students know that you care about them? And if I asked you guys that question, I wonder how you'd answer. How do you know they care about? How do they know that you care about them? The example I give is, we've all been supervised and had evaluations at work. Now, think about a time when your supervisor evaluated you, and if you didn't know if they cared about you and they gave you feedback, you would think that feedback was about them or helping them advance their career. But if you have a supervisor or a teacher who really cares about you and you know it, and they give you feedback, it's about you and them trying to help you. And so this is our foundational approach on everything that we do. We want to try to establish an ethic of care. And one thing we've done is we've established a document that I'll share with everyone. It's called High Level of Care, and it's broken down by positions in the school district. And we talk about what can you do to show kids that you care about them. And one thing is to give kids and staff honest evaluations, honest feedback, making sure that we're being respectful and we're giving them that information. The level of care document that we've created is a living document. I share that with anybody, and I want people to add to it. If you can think of things that you do in your role to show kids that you care about them, and you're willing to share, please do. I want to build that document to be as deep as we can get it, so people can really show kids that they care about them. A couple of my favorite quotes in regards to ethic of care. Too often we underestimate the power of a touch, a smile, a kind word, a listening ear, an honest compliment, or the smallest act of caring, all of which has the potential to turn a life around. So think about how your kids know that you care about them. In my position as superintendent, I think about this a lot. How do the principals know? How do the teachers know? And there's so many little things that you can do. In my role is just showing up lots of times, just getting out from behind my desk and being in their classroom and just walking by and saying hello to them, or asking them how their family's doing, etc. So there's lots of ways you can do it, but we feel it's really, really important for our foundation of success. The other one is self-determination theory, another big rock, I guess, big concept that we talk about, and it's essentially motivation. It's why we do what we do. Again, growth mindset, ethic of care, and self-determination theory. If I had to say pick 3 areas to start on, those would be 3 of them. So when we interview principals and administrators, I often ask them, how do you motivate kids? And they have all these ideas and thoughts, but not many of them really know the scientific or the best practice and the reasons why we motivate kids. So how do you motivate kids? Again, I ask that question a lot. Well, the answer, or self-determination theories, there's 3 things that motivate people. That's competence, relatedness, and autonomy. Competence is that, if you can give a student some additional knowledge or show them how to do something, that's one part of the 3. Relatedness, if they can be part of a team or part of a group, that's another thing that motivates people. And then lastly is autonomy, giving them the decision to make their own choices on how they're going to move forward in the future. I see this so often in the classrooms, and we have all these national and state standards that we're having to talk about and teach. We're taking some of our autonomy away from teachers. But if you want to see a really motivated teacher, go watch a social studies or a history teacher who's passionate about the Civil War, and watch their Civil War unit. If you give them the autonomy to say, use your passion and go teach it. So when we talk about motivation for all of us, those are the 3 things, whether we're talking about staff or we're talking about students. And so we want to really work on how do we do that, and how do we make sure we can motivate kids. If we get really good at doing those 3 things, we move to intrinsically motivate the kids, which is our ultimate goal for, I think, all of us in education, is to get kids to be intrinsically motivated to improve themselves and be better. Again, self-determination theory is one that is really, really important. And again, I know I'm going through these really quick based on our time, and they're very surface or high level type stuff. But again, I encourage you guys to do some more research and look into these in more detail. Transformational leadership is another one that we use as an approach. Essentially, our whole program is a transformational program. Like I said at the beginning, it's not cookie cutter approach. We want people to take these things, learn about it, and then how do they adapt it into their own role. So the leader in transformational leadership serves as a role model. Modeling is one of the most powerful teaching techniques that are out there. And so if the leader's not modeling these things, it's not going to be nearly as effective. We want leaders to inspire people with their passion. When I talk to our staff, I hope they see the passion I have for kids and the passion I have for being a positive influence. And I do that because of the people that did it for me. And then shows a genuine concern, challenges for innovation, and gives autonomy. So transformational leadership, again, another thing that you can do in the classroom to help your students be as successful as they can is that transformational approach. Again, a couple quotes that I think are really good quotes. Modeling effect, I talked a little bit about that. When you talk about the athletic aspect, even parenting or teaching, we tell kids don't do as I do as I say. And I always chuckle about that because kids are going to do what you do, no matter what you say oftentimes. So I talk to our staff and our coaches and our administrators about how do you handle mistakes? So kids are learning by what you're doing. If you make a mistake and you don't take ownership of it or make changes so it doesn't occur again, what are they really learning? How do you handle stress in the classroom? We're putting more stress on teachers every single day. We're having fewer teachers to do that. So again, how do we handle stress and how do we handle mistakes is really important from a modeling aspect. There goes that my pictures again, Nancy. They just keep popping up on there. I'm not sure why it does that, but so moving forward, after we did this for 1 year, we sent a group of our coaches to a 2-day workshop, and they got more training on it. And we came back, and the first thing we do is we encourage folks to be very clear with our expectations and why do we do what we do. So every program that we've done is come up with our purposes and our goals. So at North Callaway, after we went through the training and we did some research on all those concepts that we talked about, we came up with our athletic department purposes. And this outlines the overall purpose of our athletic program. Like I said, it was developed by our coaches and our administration. And ultimately, once we put this out, our board mandated that all of our parents read and understand what our purposes were before we move forward. And this is something that I've done in every school district, every classroom I've been in. And I think it's really important that we say that right up front. When we do this, we found that parental complaints have gone down. Support from our parents has been better. But again, we're not here to make Division I athletes or anything of that nature. We're here to help kids get better and be successful in life. So our purpose was to win kids through sport. And here we moved it over into our classroom then. And this is our purpose. We called it Thunderbird Proud. And the 4 high points that we had is: number 1, have a high level of care. Number 2, a positive and enthusiastic attitude. Base all decisions on what's best for kids and have a commitment to get the job done. And you can see in the yellow there, those are the 4 areas that they came from, all that research and studying we did about those best practices that are out there. That's where our foundational goals came from. So then we talked about how are we going to establish a high level of care. I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but that's from Neil Notting's work. Here's a few things that we do every single day. You can greet them, you can have lunch with them, celebrate their successes, compliment them, ask them their interests, model vulnerability, and own your own mistakes. So again, always thinking about how are we making sure that kids know we care about them, I think is really important. And that's one thing you'll hear me say over and over again today. The other part is that we talk about after we've set those goals is true self-reflection. I think it's really important for us as educators to think about, how are we doing things? And we ask folks, the first question is, what are you thankful for? And so then we start to talk about gratitude and how important it is. I think about this quite often. Actually, in my office, I've got a sign that says, before you leave this room, think about 3 things that you're grateful for. Oftentimes we get stuck in the negative or the tough stuff. The story I tell is not too long ago, I was having one of those days at work, and I got to work and there was a staff issue, and then there was a student issue, and I had parents calling and complaining. I remember thinking, you know, if I can just get through the day so I can get home and relax. I got home, I made it, drove up, I pulled in the driveway, opened the front door, Nerf dart flew by my head. My other son was yelling at me. The kids were fighting. I was like, oh my gosh, it just continues. So I had supper, and I remember I went outside and we had a patio in our backyard, and I was sitting there, and I stopped and looked. It was right in front of me. You know, I had a very beautiful family. I had a nice house. I had all the things that were in front of me, and I remember thinking to myself, man, what am I stressed about? You know, there's so many people in this world who were really struggling, you know, to have food every single day, and or even have clean drinking water. And I was complaining, being stressed out. So I kind of took the approach to too blessed to be stressed, and it's something we talk about a lot with our staff and our students. Why do you teach? Why are you in education? Another thing we ask people to reflect on. You know, the reason I'm in education is because of Miss Julie Doom, like I talked about earlier, and my coaches. So reflect on, why do we teach? Why are you in education? What is your attitude? How am I going to serve and share? And in what ways can I improve? So again, we think it's really important for us to keep things in perspective and not forget our why, and focus on that gratitude. So when people ask me what I'm thankful for, there they are. You know, my two families, my work family and my home family. So I've been so blessed and fortunate enough to have all these things in my life. So how do I serve and share? I do this. I travel around and try to help people just share some of the success stories that we've had. And if we can help them take little pieces that they can use in their classroom or in their school district, I think that's really, really important. I always have to talk about the importance of how can we improve. Literacy is something in our schools that I think is underestimated, but not only for our students, but for our staff. I'm an avid reader and try to read as much stuff as I can on leadership, because what I'm passionate about. So I encourage you guys as educators, you know, whatever you're passionate about, read. I saw a quote the other day that the average CEO reads over 90 books a year. And so sometimes I ask our staff, how many books did you read this year? You know, they'll say 3 or 4. And I'm like, people just, it's so powerful when you read, the impact that it has on you, and can make you be better in all things in your life. So as we started to transition this into our classrooms, we started a positive teaching team. So it started, like I said, with our coaches in that athletic department, but then we wanted to shift over and how do we make this in the classroom? A lot of the very similar concepts, but it's just in the classroom. So we developed a team, and our goal was to build a positive culture district-wide. And you can see there it was a very diverse group. We had coaches, we had teachers. We actually went and presented at one of our state conferences. And again, just really talked about how we can take that transition, the approach of those big rocks we talked about, and how can we use those in the classroom. So really, really good concept. It's strategies for teaching the positive coaching in the classroom setting. So at North Callaway, we continue to grow and develop this. We presented at conferences. It's a concept where everybody is welcome. There's leaders in their departments. And again, we had a model school end up making a video that our staff shared with other school districts, and just some simple concepts of how we adapted that strategy into the classroom. So there at North Callaway, one thing we continue to move forward. We have an online digital workshop that's out there for the Institute that people can take. We do surveys. We have developed a student athlete lesson. So we also talk about this with our coaches and our teachers, but the next step that we're right now currently doing is how do we get it to our kids? And at the end, I'll show you guys some of that program that we show to kids. I'll move through it pretty quickly, but again, things that we're trying to do to improve. We also start surveying our students. This is an example of one of our surveys, and we do this on a yearly basis, and we do it over and over again to try to see if we're improving it. And the questions we come up with, again, are things that relate to the areas that we're talking about. So what have we learned about positive coaching in the classroom or on the athletic field? It's not about being soft or everybody getting a trophy. It's about, first and foremost, establishing a high level of care. It's about teaching what it takes to be the best. It's about pushing them to be pushing themselves to be their best. It's about passion. It's about true teamwork. striving for success every single day. And ultimately, it's not about us as individuals, but it's about our kids. So again, the concept there was very, very positive and very impactful. Here's some of the things that we saw in the 3 years that we did it when I was there. We saw an increase in student attendance, higher participation in extracurricular activities. We saw an increase in school spirit, higher work ethic from our students and athletes, increased parental support, higher staff morale, increased staff motivation. So again, the concept that we've been trying to do is very effective, and we've seen it be positive. And I think one of the most powerful parts of it is that it's not a cookie cutter approach. We take those approach and we develop it as a team. There goes those videos again, Nancy, and make sure that we apply that. So then I went from North Callaway to Oak Grove. And again, we went through the same concept. And here's our athletic goals. These are our goals and purposes from our athletic department. They're different than they were from North Callaway. And I think that's indicative that it's not a cookie cutter approach. It's that what was needed at Oak Grove is something that we came up with. So those again are in the PowerPoint for everyone to see. And lastly, we'll do this real quickly so we have time for questions, but this is an example of our student workshop. So I talked about, we started with our coaches and we moved to our staff, and now this is how we get it to our kids. So the first thing we talk about in our student workshop is how do we define success? I think that's important for us to talk about as educators. You know, how do we define our success in the classroom? How do we define our success on the athletic fields? And ultimately, we define it as that you give your best every single day. You gave your best on game day. In athletics, it may be a ball game, but in the classroom, it would be a test. So if we can be successful, if every one of our students do their best, give their best on game day. And then we talk about the process of success. And you guys have seen this from earlier. There's 3 steps: believe you can do it, work hard, and never quit. And then we go into each one of those concepts a little more in depth. So we talk about, you have to believe that you can do it. There's a video. We talked to them about, again, everybody in this room can be great. And I say that every place I've spoke, everyone on this call can be the best educator ever, if you're willing to do the things to get that accomplished. In the athletic realm, we talk a lot about, it doesn't matter where you start, it matters where you finish. So we give this example of, years ago, they said the natural, they call it, where a person was just born and had more athletic ability, and they became the elite. In today's society, we don't feel that way. We see people who are born at all different levels, and through hard work and perseverance, they become very successful. So we talk to them a lot, but it doesn't matter where you start, it matters where you finish. And so then we talk about having them research some of the folks that are out there in the world of athletics, and have them research, how hard do they work? What are some things they've been through, some challenges, and how did they persevere? And then we go into each one of them and give some examples. Michael Jordan is one that we talk about. He was cut from his high school basketball team, and he just had this approach of being the hardest worker out there, and ultimately became one of the best basketball players ever. Walter Payton and some of the struggles that he went through. He wasn't recruited by any SEC schools, went to Jackson State, and became ultimately one of the best running backs ever. Lisa Fernandez is the pitcher. She was told her hands were too small, she'll never make it. Turned out to be one of the best athletes ever. Kobe Bryant's work ethic is well documented. His name is Albert Pujols. And so we talked to him about, these guys may have been born up on the higher spectrum, and we kind of set the kids up, because regardless, they almost always say, well, those guys were all, Kobe Bryant's 6'6", and these guys are all great big and super successful because of some of their attributes that they were given. And I say, you're right. But then we have them look at some other folks. And these are some folks we have them look at. So Muggsy Bogues, Jim Abbott, Jackie Stiles, and Steph Curry. I don't know if you guys recognize any of those names, and Doug Flutie, but Muggsy Bogues was 5'3", 133 pounds. He was born in the projects and had some countless struggles as kids. Was so poor they didn't even have a basketball goal. They hung a milk crate on the wall, and through hard work and perseverance, he achieved. Here's a picture of Muggsy Bogues when he played for Wake Forest. So we talk about people who were born maybe not with all those attributes, and they can still be successful as well. Jim Abbott was born with one hand. He ultimately was pitcher in the major leagues for 10 years. He actually pitched a no-hitter in 1993 and had 2 hits and 21 at-bats. So here's a guy who was born with one hand, but through belief, hard work, and perseverance, he was successful. In the Midwest, we talk about Jackie Stiles. She was from a really small town in Kansas. When I developed this program, one of our schools was pretty much the same size as hers. But again, through hard work, she became one of the best at what she did. Steph Curry, a lot of people know about him. What they don't know is that he only had one scholarship offer coming out of college, and ultimately changed the game of basketball, I think, for some aspects because of his skills and ability to shoot the basketball. Doug Flutie was a smaller gentleman who didn't make the NFL, but went to the USFL and became ultimately successful in the NFL. So we show all those again, just to show kids that that process of success is really important. And if you can believe in yourself, work hard, and never quit, you can be successful. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, but this, again, doesn't matter where you start. We're going through that process of success and what's important, that you believe in yourself, that you work hard, that you commit to being your best, that you give your best every single day, you never quit. So that's step one, that process of success, hard work. We ask them these questions, give them examples of Walter Payton, the natural. I talked about that already earlier, and how consistent hard work pays off. When we're giving this to athletes, we also make the connection that this is not just in the athletic field. I think that's something that is important, whether you're going to be in the band or if you want to be the best math person, if you want to be the best nurse, whatever it is, this process is still very similar and is proven to be successful. So we always make that connection. When you see people on TV and they're being successful, you don't see all the dedication, hard work that goes into it. And then never quit. We give some examples of perseverance. Some of these I really like is that Thomas Edison, when he was inventing the light bulb, he tried 10,000 times before he came up with it. I think maybe the normal person would maybe try 1,000 times. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know if I'd try 1,000 before I gave up. Harry Potter went to 13 publishers and was turned down. The author of Harry Potter. Again, just that perseverance and never giving up is really, really important in being successful. We show them, people think the plan is just going to be nice and steady. You're going to work hard and achieve your goals, but it's how you deal in those times of adversity. And then mistakes are part of the process as well. So again, that's what we show our students on the athletic side, just to start to show them that success. And we start to bring in some of those big rock concepts into the discussions with them as well, because I think it's important that we not only teach our staff and our educators, self-determination theory and a growth mindset, but we also need to instill that in our students as well. So again, that's kind of a speed edition. Got about 10 minutes left. So I would, if there's any questions, I would love to have them. I will share our level of care document and the PowerPoint for anybody that wants it. But if there's any questions, I would sure be willing to answer them at this time.
Bryan, did you say you do this with the faculty in your district, or how do you implement it in your?
Yep, lots of different ways. We've done it with an entire staff in an auditorium. We've done it by department. We've done it by sports teams. We've done it by athletic departments. We found it to be most powerful if you do it like at a department level team or an athletic team with the coaches there. We found that to be really, really powerful, because then you can have some more specific goals that address what they're doing every single day in the classroom or on the ball field. So we've done it a variety of different ways. And it's been very powerful and very successful. But again, that premise of it's not a cookie cutter approach. We don't tell people, here's how you do it. Here's some concepts you need to think about before you move forward. I think the one caveat with that would be, we always encourage them to start off with what's their goals and purposes as a group and come up with them as a group. And then be very transparent about what those are. Share them with your parents, share them with your staff, share them with everybody, because that's why we're here. And again, it's been very successful.
And have you gone into some districts or gone to some conferences and done like an hour presentation to try to get others interested? You've done some of that work?
Yeah, the challenging part is when we do a workshop, it's a 1-day workshop. I mean, it takes, because we go so much more in depth on all those big rock concepts like I talked about and give examples, and we like to have that interaction with the group that we're doing. So we do have traveled quite a bit and just said, hey, if you want us to come present, and we probably did that more earlier on. Now it's really by word of mouth, and we've been in enough places and we've had enough people do it that we see just kind of different arms of it working. So now it's pretty much just the 1-day workshops that we go in and or half a day, done 2 days. So again, really depends on what the needs of each group or district is at that point.
And Bryan, I know that you touched kind of throughout the presentation, but healthcare individuals, we love data and numbers and things like that. Can you share any of just some of the districts or even your own that you were working with within this program, and kind of what your biggest takeaways were
Yes,
from
absolutely.
the implementation?
Sure. So when we started under the athletic realm, I think one of the most important things we saw was that the decrease in the number of parental complaints. I think that's kind of why we started in North Callaway, is that our parents were unhappy and we were having issues at ball games and kids weren't going out for sports. So number one, we saw a decrease in the amount of concerns. We saw an increase in the number of students participating in sports. The one thing that we really look forward to doing every year is our survey for each one of our teams or our groups, because that data is something we can compare and get a gauge of success for the prior year. And the questions we ask on the survey are based on our goals and purposes. Are we being successful in what we're doing? When we move into the academic side, our attendance has improved in every one of our districts that we did it, that we've seen do it, if they can implement it over a period of time, because again, we think that foundation of kids, they don't care what you know until they know that you care. But if they know you care, and some of our kids are dying to be cared for, and they come to school and they get so much love at school because they're not getting it at home. So we really try that foundation of care. We've seen grades improve. We've seen behavior incidents decrease. So again, all the things we're talking about from an accountability standpoint in education, we've seen improvements. We even talk about school safety, and if we can really focus. There was a school shooting in Colorado I saw on the news today. If we can show every single kid that we care about them, and we can identify kids who are sitting by themselves in the cafeteria and going through these issues, that level of care is something that can hopefully make all of our kids not only more successful, but make us safer in the classroom as well. So we're really utilizing a lot of data. And again, hopefully we're making a positive impact on every single kid and staff member that we come in contact with.
And Bryan, we have a question in the chat. It says, what were the biggest challenges when you were implementing the program, and how did you combat them?
So by far, the number one thing that we run into as far as a challenge is, I don't know if this is politically correct, with naysayers. People say it's not the right approach. So the way we do that is, and this is, I'm going to say this personally how I do it. My philosophy is that we invite every single person on board. We're upfront with our expectations and our goals and purposes. We let folks know that we're here under these contexts, these terms, that it's okay to make mistakes and we're going to move forward. But we've had we've had folks, especially on the coaches side, who don't believe in that approach. They believe you got to yell at kids and scream at them. And so we tell them, number one is that we're going to invite you on board. But then if they don't get on board and they don't meet the expectations, then we've had to make changes. And that's been difficult, because some programs are very successful, and whether that's academically or athletically, and maybe their leader is not using this approach. But again, we talk about if we're not caring about kids, it's not the way we want to do things. So that's been the number one challenge we've had, and it's tough when you have a coach who's been there for a long time, but his philosophy was to yell and scream at kids and demean kids. You know, we just feel that's not the way to help people reach their potential.